Some of the key takeaways that we got from our conversations yesterday are: one, for us to build better beyond the pandemic, we need to start working better, smarter, and bold. Second, we need to have a regional approach to markets. Third, we need to monetize our agricultural sector. Food security and food safety has to go hand in hand. The fourth thing is that we need collaboration of different actors for impact. Research needs to be implemented, and especially the health research. It needs to be implemented, and social entrepreneurs need to play a key role in implementing this. Number 5, we need to have a comprehensive entrepreneurial education that will help us to see the change that we need to make for impact and for recovery of our economic situation in Africa. Our focus today will be a call to action for an inclusive economic recovery. And this will be the flow of discussion today. In our first session, we'll kick off with our first high-level panel, which will be moderated by Abu Musuza. The second, it will be followed up by 3 brain trust sessions, which will run concurrently. And our last sessions of the day will be: 1, the first will be on technology for humanity, and the second will be impact investing and grant making. These 2 last sessions will also run concurrently. Let us engage more on social media using the hashtag AACOSE2020. At this moment, I take the opportunity to welcome Mr. Abu Musuza, the co-founder and CEO of Flip Africa Uganda. He will start the session of call for action, which is geared to helping us understand what we need to do better to focus and also to ensure that we have a better flow and a better productivity in Africa beyond the pandemic. Over to you, Mr. Abu. Thank you.
I'm honored to be hosting, the start to the day, and the opening panel, and would like to thank very much everyone who's joining us from around the world for this important conversation. I'm also honored to be chairing a panel, of very, very, esteemed people with extraordinary experience, in the topic that we're going to talk about. So today, largely, we're going to be talking about change, and how, work is changing, particularly around social entrepreneurship and how that topic is evolving. This, when we go back to where Ashoka started, almost 40 years ago, Ashoka noticed that market failures, had led to a lot of people being left out of mainstream, education, health, finance, access to justice, or any other, economic systems. And so, traditionally governments have been coming in to fulfill, some of these responsibilities, but even what government was doing was not sufficient. And so social entrepreneurs, international development partners, non-government organizations have also been coming together, coming in to basically play, part of this role. And, in the earlier times, the old models have been, each of us working, independently, in silos and trying to do the best that we can. But increasingly, we're being forced to rethink those models. We're being forced to co-create and collaborate, and forge new alliances that, hadn't been thought about before. And therefore there's an increasing demand for more resilient economic and social models. And COVID-19 has just thrown a spanner in the works, and really showed us how, the cracks and stretched resources, our individual resources. And so today we'll basically be talking about, this whole idea of co-creation and collaboration across sectors to to build more resilient economic models, that can stand waves, such as pandemics, and continue to serve people wherever they are. On the panel today, I'll just very briefly introduce, who we have. We have Arif Neki, who is a senior advisor for the United Nations Strategic Partnerships and the coordinator for the SDG Partnerships Forum, Partnerships Platform. We also have Emma Naila Ngugi, the Regional Director for East, Central, and Southern Africa at CARE. We have Gunther Schall, who's calling in all the way from Vienna in Austria. And Gunther is the head of the private sector and development at the Austrian Development Agency. And finally, she came in as a very late addition, which is why you probably didn't see her on the poster. But we are excited to have Ashley Alton Nyango, who is the sector team lead for agribusiness at the Africa Enterprise Challenge Fund. And then, seated in the plenary room is Vincent Odiambo, who is essentially our host, and he's the East Africa Director for Ashoka. So I just wanted to basically give 3 minutes to each of our panelists to just introduce themselves and introduce the work that they're doing, and then we'll basically just pick up the conversation from there. And I will begin with Emma from CARE. If you could just give us a word.
Thanks, Abu, and greetings to fellow panelists and participants. My name is Emma Ngugi. I'm the Regional Director for CARE, East Central and Southern Africa, based here in Nairobi. And CARE, as some of you may know, is a big international non-governmental organisation in the region. We work in 15 countries, from Sudan to Madagascar, and we are responsible for a range of different kinds of work, both in terms of humanitarian and emergency response, but also in long-term development programming. And we work around issues like education, livelihoods, access to markets, prevention of violence, peace, healthcare programming, a whole kind of range of different kinds of projects and programs depending on the needs in the places where we work. And I think, this conversation is really interesting for us because organizations like CARE come perhaps from quite traditional models of delivering development interventions and humanitarian responses. And, we can all think of the scenarios 20, 30 years ago where organizations, not just CARE, but like CARE, really focused around the delivery of social services, access to basic services, could even be the delivery of food relief on a large scale, in both in crisis, but also for development purposes. And I think, over time, our understanding of development, how change happens, and particularly, as Abu was saying, around the challenges of really building out capacity and sustainable solutions, to development challenges. Our perspectives and our understanding of those dynamics have really changed. And I think we understand much more now and see much more clearly now that the long-term provision of basic services without having any real vision or understanding of how that provision can become sustainable, whether it's through working in partnership with governments to enable them as responsibility holders to be able to manage these services in the longer term, whether it's about working with communities to be able to resource their own solutions, many of which have long existed, to development challenges. This is really something that's confronted us in the last 20 years or so, and we've really been building out our capacity to think much more broadly and in much deeper terms about engaging with different kinds of development solutions. And Just so that that's really, one of the real background, stories to our partnership with Ashoka and are interested in these conversations. And this continent is a thriving location for entrepreneurship. It offers, entrepreneurship, and particularly social entrepreneurship, offers, real opportunity to help people resolve problems that address them in the ways that they know best, in ways that are sustainable and resilient. And we want to be part of that. We tend to work on the front line with communities that really aren't normally reached by traditional kind of government interventions. Perhaps they're not obviously markets, for big traditional businesses, and they tend to be excluded from the range of kind of infrastructure development or investment opportunities that they need to become successful social entrepreneurs. And so we're really interested in finding different kinds of partnerships and innovating different kinds of solutions. And just the last thing to say, I think a particular interest for us as CARE, but it should be an interest for all of us when we think about social entrepreneurship and development, is the role of women and girls. And when we think about who is the worst served and the least reached by both traditional development interventions and by markets, it tends to be women and girls who have, really important responsibilities, who very often are managing their own businesses, as well as responsible for a range of other responsibilities at home and in their communities. And so CARE is particularly interested in thinking about how social entrepreneurship and social innovation can really help unlock the enormous potential of women in our region. So thanks, Abu, and looking forward to the conversation. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Emma. CARE is a truly fascinating organization, since I've been interacting with them for the last 3 years and seeing that transition and their thinking. I'll hand over to Ashley to sort of give her opening remarks.
Great, thanks. And I'm just going to share some visuals as I introduce. But as mentioned, I'm Ashley Onyango with Africa Enterprise Challenge Fund. And I'm going to focus, really on one of our recent programs that we've launched, because I think this is an incredible example of an initiative that is born out of partnerships and alliances. So the Kakuma Calabae Challenge Fund, when I think of the phrase, it takes a village, it is very much about what Kakuma Calabae Challenge Fund is. So this is a program that's co-implemented with ourselves, Africa Enterprise Challenge Fund, and IFC, in partnership with Turkana County Government and UNHCR, and funded by a consortium of donors. So we have funding from the German Development Corporation, Netherlands government, Swiss Development Corporation, FCDO, and the European Union. And just to give you a little bit of a flavor about what Kakuma and what Calabae is, Kakuma is a town in northwestern Turkana County in Kenya. So you can see it up in the top northwestern part of Kenya there. And this is the site of the UNHCR refugee camp that was established in 1992. Over time, the number of refugees coming into the camp were so large and overcrowding that they then expanded into the Calabae settlement, just about 20 kilometers from Kakuma. So that makes up the Kakuma Calabae area, inclusive of the host community, so refugees and local nationals, which embodies about 250,000 people, which is just roughly equal to Kenya's 7th largest city. And really the, sort of what we're looking at here and the change-making opportunity is that there's just such an established urban center here and a thriving economy, but it's heavily dependent on informal economy, informal business. And so IFC and AECF being very geared towards challenging and crowding in private sector to create change and social impact, we decided to develop the Kakuma Calabae Challenge Fund to really do just that. So some key objectives of the KKCF are really to support the entry of new businesses. So we're really challenging private sector businesses, social enterprises to come bring bring new products, services to this market, a very deserving community of people, and also try to develop out more employment opportunities for the folks living around here. We don't want to forget those that are already there. We know there are a lot of businesses that have already taken the plunge to start to address the social issues that are in this town of Kakuma and Calabe, and so we want to support the scaling of those businesses. Third, we really want to support the entrepreneurial ecosystem within Kakuma Calabe. So bringing social entrepreneurs to Kakuma Calabe, but then also focusing on those that already exist. So the micro and small businesses that are run by local refugees and local host community members, and supporting them. And finally, making it easier to do business. And there's a big play on partnership here with Turkana County government. So really enabling the environment for a conducive business environment, working with Turkana County government to make sure that as businesses enter this market, they can get what they need to do business. So there's three distinct components of KKCF. I won't go into grave detail, but just to give you a flavor. So the first one is the Rolling Competitive Business Challenge. That's where AECF is really taking charge along with IFC. The second is with IFC working with Turkana County government on the investment climate and policy advisory. And then the third is where IFC is looking at basically, their core business of what they do, the types of businesses that they invest in, and providing, illustrating the business opportunity to enter this market. So just finally, about the challenge fund aspect of it, this is where we are challenging private sector companies, we're challenging social enterprises, and later we'll be challenging the local entrepreneur ecosystem. But the first two windows of funding have now been launched and are open, and we'll be providing performance-based grants and technical assistance. Another great area of opportunity for us to partner, we're really going to be partnering with a lot of ecosystem players that are already doing work, great work, around training and workshops and building the capacity of entrepreneurs and businesses in this area. And just a tidbit on criteria for selection. So we're really looking at commercially viable businesses. So we want to see brilliant ideas. We want to see brilliant delivery models, but we want to ensure that there's a path to sustainability beyond the lifetime of the grant. And, just as Emma mentioned, we're looking at inclusivity. We want to make sure that the businesses we're supporting are taking a real inclusive lens to the work that they're doing, whether that's how they staff, creating jobs for women, jobs for youth, but also as they reach the market, who they're reaching. And finally, really creating economic, social, and environmental impact. We know there are a lot of social challenges in this area, be it water, sanitation, access to appropriate healthcare, access to education, and we want to see great ideas to really address these in a commercially viable way. So just a shout out, you can get more information on our website, kkcfke.org. We're available, but really excited to talk about this topic, talk about making change. And I think that the real link to Ashoka here is, the social entrepreneurs we're looking for can be the social entrepreneurs that Ashoka is looking for. And there's real value in kind of the complementary services that we're both providing around funding and around training and programs. So really, really looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley, for those insightful remarks. I'll go over to Gunther, all the way from Austria, to just listen to, Ada, your thinking, and just an introduction of what you're doing in the space.
Yeah, thank you, Abu. Thank you very much for the possibility to present Austrian Development Agency in this conference, and thank you very much for organizing the conference and for doing all the efforts to support social entrepreneurship in the African region, in the African continent. It's so important what you're doing, and you all know much better how you are able to change the world, how you can create impact by doing so. And I want to say thank you for all the efforts you have already done, for all things you have already given, and for that what you are still aiming for. For us, it's a great opportunity to link up with you, with the ecosystem at such occasions, because donors still need to adapt to the new world of development and the SDGs. There is an old Latin saying, I do not know if you have heard, but I'm sure it's about temporas mutantur et nos mutamus in illis, meaning times changing, and we adapt ourselves in these changes, in these times. But what does this mean for us donors? To deliver aid is a strong challenge for us as donors, meaning we need to build up skills that are adequate to these challenges. We need to understand what we are doing, what our partners are doing, and we need to avoid, for example, market distortions by delivering aid. We need, as a donor agency, an adequate organizational structure, and we need an adequate culture to support you in the most efficient way. Furthermore, it's about innovative finance. We need to think about the finance we can provide to you. Is grants the most effective way to social entrepreneurship, or what do we need else to create incentives and to support social entrepreneurs in the best way? And last but not least, we need ourselves an enabling environment. It's not only the enabling environment for social entrepreneurs, it's also our regulations that's from time to time hinder us in supporting social entrepreneurship. Why do I'm telling this to you? It's to say how important it is to be in dialogue with you, to exchange and to learn from your side, to learn about your challenges, your perspectives, your obstacles, because knowing about all these issues helps us to adapt ourselves, to ourselves, and in being in such a position, supporting you better to drive change in Africa. Thank you very much. And I wish you all the best for the conference. I'm proud being here, and I'm proud about this occasion to learn out of this dialogue.
Thank you very much, Gunther, for that interesting perspective, from international funders, and and their perspective. Over to Arif, who comes in with a different perspective from the UN, and working across boundaries, and across sectors. So Arif, your past few remarks.
Thank you very much, Abu, and good morning, fellow panelists and participants. Happy to be here. I have a great respect for both Ashoka and for Tangaza, and have had interactions in the past, so delighted to be here. My background is that I am the Senior Advisor for Strategic Partnerships at the UN Resident Coordinator's Office. Kenya is one of the larger footprints of the UN system in the South, which has about 23 agencies, funds, and programs in Nairobi, and including 2 head offices of UNEP and UN Habitat. So our partnership with the government of Kenya, the United Nations Development Assistance Framework, which is a $1.9 billion framework over 5 years, 2018 to 2022, which times exactly with the multi-partner, with the MPT3 as part of Vision 2030, the medium-term plan 3, is really intended to be delivered as a one UN delivery system. So our role is really to coordinate, support, and create the synergy across UN agencies, working with relevant ministry clusters across economic development, social development, and transformative governance. And as we were doing this, we realized that with the changing context, with Kenya being a lower middle income country, rebasing its economy, with aid shifting to trade, with ODA and grant funding shrinking, we needed to think about, under UN reform, the shift from SDG funding to financing. I've been in this environment for a while. I used to run the Aga Khan Foundation as the regional CEO for 14 years for Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And previously, with Societe Generale, the French bank, blending French treasury loans and export credits in the region. So what we've seen over time is that the writing is on the wall. We need to wean ourselves of those sweetheart bilateral grants that tended to generally fund 80% of civil society and foundations locally. So as a result, we've seen that under the SDGs, there's about $0.5 to $1.2 trillion gap in an annual implementation requirement. And the SDGs conversely also provide a $12 billion business opportunity for us. So as we see this new paradigm, we see the not-for-profit and for-profit sectors coming much more closer. And this nexus is an important one for us. The other one is, of course, to see how the world's become a smaller place, and we're all so much more connected that there are opportunities for us to converge much more locally, nationally, and globally. We're also seeing a convergence between humanitarian and development activities, and so that nexus also creates a very interesting opportunity. Ashley's presentation was interesting because I hosted the coordinator of the humanitarian private partnership platform that's trying to work with private sector and drive much of this work as well. So as we see some of these trends, I think the important issues, and Emma alluded to many of them as well, are around, how do we fill the SDG gap? How do we, as a middle income country, ensure sustainability of social impacts? Public funding, as we all know, is hugely constrained. And how do we create an opportunity for us to leapfrog our development processes and not have to wait another 50 years on a Marshall Plan, but in fact, look at harnessing big data, technology, and innovation in the best way possible. And Kenya is a great example of what we call the Silicon Savannah, and how do we kind of tap this whole innovation ecosystem as well. So, in fact, we went with Joe Mucheru, the Minister of ICT, and a team in January, just prior to the COVID breakout, to Silicon Valley, linking the Silicon Savannah and Silicon Valley, and launched an SDG Accelerator Lab last September as well, with Rockefeller Foundation and Silicon Valley universities, led by Berkeley and Stanford. So the approach really that we're taking is that we need to have convergence. We need to break the silos. We need to be able to bring private sector, philanthropy, UN agencies, development partners, government, civil society, social entrepreneurs together across this ecosystem. And I'm fully convinced that, my favorite saying is, we need to drop our egos, logos, and silos and converge for impact. Because here is a great opportunity, and we're seeing in the COVID pandemic, this has become extremely exciting. So after a few years of World Economic Forum events in Durban, Davos, Rwanda, some UN General Assembly side events, we were able to establish enough enthusiasm to create an SDG partnership platform, which is a unique platform that Kenya has established jointly with the government of Kenya and the UN system, create a multi-stakeholder partner platform as an ecosystem to make these connections happen. And the Kenya government launched this at the UN General Assembly in September 2017 with the comment that every conference tends to have pledges of partnerships, but we need a concrete ecosystem to make this happen. And it doesn't just happen by accident, or doesn't need to be transactional or ad hoc. So the SDG Partnership Platform was born, and I was given pretty much the mandate to establish 4 windows across the Big Four agenda that President Kenyatta announced just a few months after we launched. So we have 4 windows: primary healthcare, we have the food and nutrition security window, manufacturing and skills training for youth, and affordable housing. And each of these windows is a public-private partnership with the relevant cabinet secretary, the Council of Governors, the UN, but also the Kenya private sector, and a range of bilaterals, multilaterals, but also philanthropies joining us. Our experience has been that there is great appetite to do this. You're able to unlock private capital, but move it towards profit with purpose and create longer-term investment initiatives that have huge multiplier effects around SMEs, supply chains, etc., that go beyond short-term grant-funded projects and that go beyond short-term political and fiscal cycles, which oftentimes are an issue because you might have a $6 million grant on a small project, but as soon as that grant ends, you find oftentimes things stop. And so how do we create the longer-term shared value leverage of private capital to complement constrained public funding? So in the last 2.5 years, we've been able to successfully create a pipeline of $200 million of primary healthcare investment projects across Kenya. And there was a lot of cynicism initially from private sector to say that, look, primary healthcare is not where we think we can make a lot of wealth. You know, we gravitate towards secondary and tertiary health, PET scans, CAT scans, and the like. But that's not where 47 million Kenyans need to go. We need to have early detection. We need to have primary health. We need to have promotive and preventive healthcare. So we were able to do a study with McKinsey and the US government and others and identified a $6 billion opportunity in primary healthcare investments for social entrepreneurs in the next 10 years in Kenya. And this was entirely, new data. And that has helped us unlock this exciting initiative of pipeline projects. We've mapped subsectors, deal sizes and margins, and created essentially an appetite for co-investment between private sector and in some cases PPPs. Besides that, we've also been able to look at innovative financing. We found that even in the blended finance continuum, as you try and unlock private capital, there were silos. So we were able to bring together all the key financing networks in Kenya, the Kenya Bankers Association, which of course is huge. We created co-created the Africa Venture Philanthropy Alliance with Safaricom and KPMG and a number of like-minded partners. There is a sister institution to the Asian and European Venture Philanthropy Networks, 720 members, $7 billion in deals in their deal share platform last year. So Africa is now just launched its own deal share platform. Kenya is the head office as a hub, and then we have a hub in South Africa and a hub in West Africa. And what we've done also is brought in the East Africa Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, Convergence, that has over 100 impact funds supported by the Canadian government. We have the East Africa Philanthropy Network, which in my previous life I was able to found as chairman 15 years ago with 300 foundations and trusts across East Africa. And then the pensions and the cooperatives. We have opportunities where, for example, patient capital from pensions is available up to the tune of 10% under law now in Kenya, but we're only using less than 1%. So as we did that, we were able to launch a $7 million development impact bond for the world's first one for adolescent sexual reproductive health, which actually we're submitting on Monday as a second tranche to the UN Joint Fund, supported by SIF and the UK government and others. We've been supporting a $100 million primary healthcare fund for Africa, which is very much private sector led, but it's bringing in and crowding in co-investors, funders, and outcome payers. So as we look at those, we are also concerned about the issue of getting blended finance partners to improve the enabling environment to bring more financing for social enterprise. So we created the National Advisory Board for Impact Finance Task Force with blessing from the Treasury. I chair that, and all of these financing associations work with us. And the interesting thing is that they speak to us about looking for deal flow. There's no lack of private capital. And we work with the 47 counties and various county blocks, including Turkana, who basically are looking for more innovative financing that fits the ticket size, the types of conditions that they require, especially since sovereign guarantees are off the table. So the idea is to bring blended financing, to bring innovation, big data and technology, to bring investors, to bring bilateral, multilateral partners, to really converge and drive a pipeline of investments in the longer term. In the agriculture sector, we co-created and launched the Agriculture Sector Network of Kenya, SNET, that works across 100 business membership organizations, jointly with KEPSA, the Private Sector Alliance, and the Chamber of Commerce with the Ministry of Agriculture. We've also launched FintriNet, a finance, trade, and investment initiative with KEPSA, with the government and development partners, to focus primarily on attracting greater FDI and domestic investments. So I think there's a huge opportunity for all of us to work together and to see how younger, smaller innovators, social enterprises can get the kinds of supports that they're looking for. And we're quite passionate about this because we noticed that, for example, a social enterprise in Kenya is legally registered as any other business. There is no special distinction or recognition. There are no special tax incentives. Whether you're doing 80% impact on the work that a social enterprise is doing on the ground, or whether you're 100% for profit, you're treated the same way by KRA and by others. So how do we create this special class of incentives for social enterprises? The same applies to foundations. Having run foundations for many years, I would always say that foundations are a figment of our imagination in Kenya because we don't have a foundations law. We're either an NGO, a company limited by guarantee, a trust, or a social enterprise, or a society. So we're also looking at those types of legal dispensations to create a class of philanthropists who want to give more for social development. So when I look at this whole nexus of for-profit and not-for-profit, the whole need to unlock private capital to support SDG financing, to complement government financing, I see a great opportunity for us to find ways to scale and create systems influence through social enterprise. We've had 57 years since independence of what I call pilotitis, one pilot after another, which oftentimes dies and gets recycled into new pilots 10 years later. What we need really is systems, influence, and scale. And so from inception, how do we converge? How do we design initiatives that can go beyond short-term political cycles? In 2 years' time, we have elections going. We don't want half of the social enterprises to simply die off. So I think this is a great opportunity, a great conversation, and I look forward to this interaction. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Amazing. Thanks, Arif. You've touched on a broad range of things, and and the number of things that you've been involved in, and it's pretty amazing. And I've had conversations with you before around your passion for this nexus. Vincent, I will come back to you at the bottom of these conversations. Part of the parts of being the host is sometimes you come last. So forgive us. We'll basically just come around to you. But I wanted to capture the thinking behind what we're doing. I think that's an important point to consider. And I wanted to go back to Emma because yours is a very interesting case. For CARE having gone 75 years, or the past 70 years, doing traditional development. And I know that internally there's this new wave of innovation and connecting with social entrepreneurs, and starting to build more revenue-based models, and supporting that. I wanted to capture what the thinking is, what is it that that CARE has seen, that has informed this this new thinking and this new transition.
Thanks, Abu. Well, I mean, there's new and there's new, right? I mean, in some ways, the ingredients, the essential parts of the recipe that the panelists have been discussing in various ways have been there for a long time. And I think one of the things that has become very clear to organisations like CARE is that we need to actually get better at identifying those pieces that are out there and supporting and building on them. And I think one of the ironies perhaps of traditional aid models is that often, there's a prescription for communities of a certain, how we can best serve their needs. For example, in a crisis. Meanwhile, the communities themselves have distinct coping mechanisms, distinct capacities, ways of working, which are separate and ignored by the provision of projects and programs, right? And this struck me very early on, even in my own experience, when I first came to work in Kenya, in the north of Kenya. I mean, as we know, in arid, semi-arid areas, pastoralist areas, Ashley and others have talked about Kakuma. But beyond the refugee camps, obviously, there's an enormous population of people who have traditional livelihoods that are really well adapted to the environment. Lots of challenges. We could talk about it a lot. But highly entrepreneurial, reliant on trade, making really sophisticated choices about markets, about movement, about from figuring out where it's best to be, but with an understanding of where it might rain next, for example, through to really sophisticated mechanisms for managing conflict. And actually, a lot of traditional development, it struck me as I was working in those environments that a lot of our traditional development activities not only ignore those skills and capacities, but actively undermine them. And I think panelists have mentioned actually some of the kinds of interventions that we have seen historically. We start to see not only are they not best meeting the needs of communities, but they may be undermining communities' capacity in the long term. The obvious one is around the distribution of food aid, which has enormous negative impacts on markets. And so even 20, 30 years ago, in places like northern Kenya, we were already thinking about, in a time of food crisis, for example, is this a food supply problem or is this a market access problem? Right, and there's enormous amounts of interesting stuff that's been written about this out there, and you can look at this from a kind of rights-based perspective, or you can look at it from an economic markets-based perspective. But either way, you find that actually some of the ideas that we started to implement really were, good examples of ways that social entrepreneurship can really solve problems even in a crisis. So, for example, in that kind of food crisis environment in northern Kenya, is it about shipping in food, or is it about supporting cooperatives, community groups, and social entrepreneurs, for example, with transport subsidies to enable them to purchase food in places where food is a reasonable market price, and transport it up to places where there's been inflation and there's poor access to food, and actually have that as a sort of commercial but social entrepreneurship approach where it's a win-win, where small businesses actually can make sure that they are able to sustain themselves during this time of crisis, and where communities get access to food at a reasonable price. So some market intervention, for example, at times of crisis can be really effective. Another great example, for those of us who understand something about pastoralist communities and livestock, is about how you can help the livestock and market access for livestock producers. One of the huge problems in this region has been that the place where I have my livestock and want to sell it is the place where the prices are appalling, and the place where physically where livestock will fetch reasonable prices is inaccessible to me through things that are quite easily fixed in terms of market interventions to support. So we supported social entrepreneurs doing things like, again, setting up transport cooperatives. And we've seen enormous kind of development in this area in Kenya, to the point now where we have, abattoirs nearer to livestock producers, where we have storage facilities to enable livestock to be transported and fattened to get a fair price, and so on. So obviously I've got a passion for livestock, so I'll leave that one. But another great example is thinking about cash as a market intervention. And this is another example of where agencies, not just CARE, across this region have started to realize that, again, even in times of humanitarian crisis, the traditional, what we call truck and chuck operations, where you put a bunch of stuff on the back of a lorry, which communities probably don't need, and you drive it up to them, and then you deliver it to them in distribution. And these are extremely expensive, extremely inefficient, and often don't meet needs. Whereas actually, if you can think about, individuals and communities, families who have a failure of entitlement, that is to say that, because of the crisis, they have low purchasing power, they've run out of money, basically. The markets can still be functional if you support those families with cash so that they can go out and meet their needs. They're the best judges of what they need in the crisis, right? They can pay off their debts so that small businesses don't collapse. They can choose whether to use that cash for in urgent healthcare or food provision and so on. So those are some examples of where this piece is coming from. And we see, even in the current crisis of COVID, real opportunity for us as development organizations to get smarter and better in our partnerships, to learn more from the likes of the colleagues who are on the panel. Small examples. We always say it's never waste a good crisis, right? And in some ways, crises like COVID pandemic, as devastating as they are, and we can all sit and list here examples of just how concerning the economic impacts of this crisis are. I mean, even this morning, we're seeing headlines about Zambia defaulting on debt, and real concerns now that governments across the region will start to default on debt. And what does that mean, around who will control our economies in the next 10 years? We can list out these devastating impacts, but we can also see these as moments of opportunity. And this is where, as leaders in the community and as social entrepreneurs who are out there, our capacity to be adaptive, flexible, really pivot in the moment can make a huge difference. We've lived through it, right? I mean, we saw how almost immediately we were challenged around being able to access personal protective equipment. We had huge problems across this region as an NGO. We have to supply all of our frontline workers, including community-based health workers, with masks and with other protective equipment. Borders closed down, transport was switched off. All of the usual traditional ways that we would go to some big company, maybe in Europe or the US, and we would place an order and it would be delivered out of Dubai. It all failed, right? And actually, in that moment, it became obvious that we could meet this need, and many other organizations have done this as well, could meet this need and possibly have a beneficial impact locally by shifting the way that we procure and by actually encouraging the manufacture of locally appropriate personal protective equipment. And now, I don't know about everybody else, but I've got, a range of face masks in beautiful kitenge, and I have, my face mask, which matches my outfit when I go to my cousin's wedding tomorrow. And actually, what we've seen is a really interesting example of that kind of capacity to harness capacity in the market to pivot to meet the need. And it's very striking from an NGO perspective. This doesn't happen in the traditional NGO model, where we sit down and we do our 5-year strategic plan and we stick to it. This kind of stuff happens because we are able to develop greater flexibility ourselves, and we're able to say, that was the plan. Today it's a different context. How can we make the choices that we need to make right now? So I don't know if I'm speaking to your question, Abu, exactly, but I think in all of this, we see real opportunity. What interests us, particularly in our partnership, is that while there are other organizations out there in the private sector and also represented by colleagues on this call who have a much greater expertise around this piece, around building social entrepreneurship and capacity, we also really believe that it's important for us to be really clear-minded about ensuring that there are positive impacts. And I think that's something that NGOs like CARE can bring to the table. We can offer some perspectives that really challenge, perhaps, and speak to concerns that while the market can function it doesn't for a lot of people. And some of that is about us getting better, you know, at managing our businesses and supporting the growth of businesses. But some of that is about us being really honest and facing into the fact that, you know, there are deep challenges of marginalization, discrimination, you know, that start from the most basic level of, for example, of access to education, which need to be addressed to make our markets fair and functional, and make sure that everybody, the most marginalized folks in our communities, also get a fair shot. Let me stop there.
Awesome. Yeah, those are very interesting insights, and, you know, being, you know, part of Ashoka and, you know, having worked with CARE, we do notice the incredible passion that you have, you know, and drive, you know, to make CARE's work more entrepreneurial, but also to support a lot more social entrepreneurs. Vincent, I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself briefly, so that, you know, people who are seeing you and not wondering, you know, who the silent person is. And then I'll come to you, Ashley, you know, around, you know, AACF, you know, and the work that you've been doing for a very long time as well, you know, particularly touching on this point. And I know you have very interesting examples, you know, to share. Vincent.
Thank you, Abu. You mentioned, you know, being the host. I think I would have rather just stay as a host and listen to this conversation, because it speaks to, and this is obvious, what Ashoka does, but also what the annual Africa Conference on Social Entrepreneurship is all about. But by name, I'm Vincent Odhiambo, lead Ashoka's work in East Africa. For those of you who may not know of Ashoka, and I'm getting to learn that so many people know about Ashoka and Ashoka's work, we are credited for defining the space of social entrepreneurship. So Bill Drayton, the founder of Ashoka, coined the term, and to help the world to understand of this new space, not new in the sense that it was invented. I mean, there were men and women who are already working in that space, but to get to that point where social entrepreneurship is appreciated the way it is appreciated now, it was important to find these men and women to support them in scaling their innovations and just, you know, shining a spotlight on them. And that is how the world got to know about social entrepreneurship. So what we do with these social entrepreneurs, I mean, Abu being one of the fellows actually from East Africa, and we have about 4,000 plus, a growing number of social entrepreneurs in our network globally. There's two-pronged engagement. One is an engagement to help these social entrepreneurs to scale their innovation. And in terms of scaling here, what we always think about as Ashoka is how do they affect systemic change? And I'll come to that. Then the other one is working with them to get to understand Ashoka's vision of everyone a change maker world, and to support that vision, to support build that vision. And from the conversation so far, there's a lot that is touching on these two. One, if you think about systems change, we see, you know, many social entrepreneurs, you know, figuring out system change around market dynamics. So either increasing access to a service, increasing access to goods, or introducing a new market where none existed. And of course, a lot of many speakers have already spoken about this, looking at those who are marginalized. The other area that we are seeing more social entrepreneurs focusing on is on policy change. So reaching systemic change through policy. And I think I think it was Arif Neki, you mentioned this also in terms of policy, having a proper policy framework to help social entrepreneurs and social enterprises thrive. So this is something that we are seeing a lot of social entrepreneurs kind of focusing on. There is also the business, you know, social congruence. A lot of social entrepreneurs wanting to learn from the business sector, and also, you know, business sector wanting to learn from social entrepreneurs. So those are some of the ways that we are seeing Ashoka Fellows affecting systemic change. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is primarily because of the conversation we are having. To achieve any of these things, I don't think there's any social entrepreneur out there who can do it alone. And I don't think there is any one particular sector that can confidently drive this. So that's the reason why when we have all the panelists that we have now, reflecting on the panelists that we have yesterday, and everyone is talking about collaboration, the need to accelerate, you know, sustainable development goals, achievement of SDGs. There is a need to accelerate growth. There's a need to match challenges with solutions. when everyone is talking about this, and it comes back to collaboration, how do we collaborate? And that is one thing that as an organization, Ashoka has learned, not just here in East Africa or in Africa, but globally. We cannot achieve much if we do not collaborate. And the collaboration that we are talking about, and also this has already been touched on, is a collaboration that thinks beyond one sector. So for this collaboration to be effective, for us to accelerate and match all these solutions, challenges with solutions, especially now that the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us and has demanded of us to break down silos, is that it has to be cross-sectoral. It has to be cross-generational. We have to, have these conversations and actions across generations. We have to be as inclusive as possible. So it has to be cross-gender conversations and actions happening for us to really get to where we want to be. But then also there's something else that I just want to highlight, because this is what the fourth edition of AACOSE was all about. We were very intentional looking at, and we have already felt this last yesterday and today. This conversation is already, you can feel the vibration of what kind of impact the ecosystemic approach would have. So it was very intentional for us, thinking, how do we link? How do we bring this conversation across different sectors, even for those sectors that are not traditional allies of, say, higher education or even social impact, spaces? How do we create those linkages? But also, how do we zoom this away from just thinking locally or even regionally or even continentally to global? So building also these bridges across the globe, thinking, how do we connect with similar ecosystems and learn from them and also share from them, say, in Europe, in Asia, in the US. I know, Abu, this is a lot for our host as a way of introduction, but I'm really loving this conversation. I want to just get it back to you so that we can get into the details of the subject matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. I also want to recognize Clemens Mlokozi, who's joining us all the way from Germany. I don't know if it is in Munich. Usually that's where, in Munich. Nice. Clemens, I'm going to bring you in this conversation, in a few minutes. But I just wanted to capture Ashley and Gunther's thoughts on, on this whole idea of, cross-sector collaborations, what you have done and what the thinking has been behind, what AACF and ADA has, is thinking. Ashley, you can go fast. Let's try to keep our comments, fairly brief, because we're really now trying to get to the end of this.
Yeah, great. So I think, it's really evolved for AACF. When AACF was first designed and developed, it was a program. It is now a standalone development institution, which has, evolved over time. But initially, AACF was positioned to come in with funding, really to surface, innovative ideas, to support social entrepreneurs, building proof of concept and getting them to scale to a point where commercial funders or impact investors would be really interested in then, buying into that idea. Over time, I think the reality is that it just requires so much more. It's not just financing. And so talking about kind of collaboration outside of what our core objective was or our core mandate, it was about how do we build the capacity of these entrepreneurs? How do we support the development of these businesses internally? So setting up controls and systems to actually, make them more bankable and more attractive to then, growth capital, sources of growth capital. And so that has evolved a lot over time and really starting to develop out our thinking around technical assistance, capacity building support. I think on the other end of it is what happens after a social entrepreneur or social business gets a grant and they've been able to spend time building out their idea, doing R&D, getting out into the market. There needs to be growth capital. And the initial thinking and hypothesis was really that would be more organic than the reality. And so AACF is taking a much more intentional approach to providing support to build out, whether that's helping our entrepreneurs figure out what is the next stage of capital you're looking for, Is it equity? Is it debt? What does that look like for your business? Who are the players that are most aligned with you? So doing some matchmaking, and then liaising with those types of financiers in the market. So other impact investors, financiers that are willing to come in and say, okay, great, there's something substantive here for us to buy into too. So I think that we've done a lot to build out, where our core mandate was provide this funding, get some ideas going. Now we've started to crowd in other players to help really that journey of this entrepreneur to succeed and grow and scale. And I think the work that Ashoka does is really great, building in sort of the programming around what social entrepreneurship is. Even just positioning, a lot of entrepreneurs have these great ideas, but they might not even know how to narrate that from a social impact perspective, right? To make it quite attractive to the players in this space. So there's a lot of work, and I think, AACF is not alone in this journey. We certainly have a role to play, but we're always looking for the collaboration, the other partners that we can link up to have complementary services to these types of entities that we're working with.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Ashley. Gunther, from the perspective of an international funder, I know you recently, Ada and Ashoka and CARE recently came together and partnered on this program called the Visionary Program, which is looking at the question of, the kind of leadership that is now required for, cross-sector, economic growth, cross-sector collaborations, and bringing in a lot more players into the social entrepreneurship space. I wanted to understand, from your perspective, what is it that caught your eye in that kind of partnership, and what is it that ADA intended to achieve, in terms of financing, these sort of like normally odd, players coming together, and creating, something as powerful as the Visionary Program.
Yeah, thank you, Abu. In our world in ADA, we had in the past very strong separations. On the one hand, we had traditional partners like civil society organizations, and on the other hand, we worked with the private sector. And during the past years, we learned that this world is changing. The civil society sector is not behaving in the same way. They are changing because they are working more and more business oriented, and using different theories of change, adapting more to business like theories of change. At the same time, we recognize that also the private sector is orienting more and more towards impact, and also investors are orienting towards impact. And having seen this, recognizing this also together with our partners from Ashoka, we said that it is helpful to tap potential with the joint learning effort, and this was designed years ago by Ashoka in Austria as a program running in the CE region to link up different actors from different parts of the society to learn together in a joint learning effort and to co-create together. And we were proud to be able to support this initiative as ADA with only a very small funding. So in good initiatives do not need huge amounts of funding. In many cases, small funding can also help a lot. And then some years later, Ashoka asked us, together with CARE, if we could support them in scaling up their experiences towards Eastern Africa. And yeah, we enjoyed the learning effort. We experienced this learning effort also for ourselves when being able to participate, and also our partners were able to participate and benefited from this great experience. Yeah, I think it's to change the world. It's important to drive this change, to support co-creation, and we are happy that also together with other partners we find new solutions that tap co-creation activities. So, for example, we found ways to cooperate also with innovation agencies in the last time, because they are very experienced in creating, in supporting innovation, and we are using this as well to drive innovation in our partner countries.
Thank you very much, Gunther. And indeed, that program, is quite powerful. Having myself attended it, it answers some really critical questions, around leadership for these kinds of cross-sector collaborations. I know Arif has to jump off, earlier than we're ending, and I wanted to give him an opportunity before I come to you, Clemens. Arif, your final thoughts on, particularly, I wanted you to touch on the question of leadership. How is leadership changing as we continue to recreate, how we are working, in terms of partnering with people we normally don't partner around creating change. Businesses are beginning to change and looking at their work more in terms of not just the bottom line, but the impact that I'm having on my community. How is business leadership changing? What new skills need to be captured? I wanted to capture your thoughts on that before you jumped off.
Thank you, Abu, and a great discussion. I find that there is a much more stronger appetite for collaboration, as I mentioned. And what I'm finding is that as we see private sector, philanthropy, innovators, and others come together, including government, what I find is that, it's not just about the reflex of, the love of God, compassion, and philanthropy. It's also about enlightened self-interest. And private corporations understand now that if they don't get into the profit with purpose train, they're basically an endangered species. I think a lot of new consumers, a lot of understanding around climate change, understanding about waste, and understanding about social responsibility is actually creating very strong pressure on private sector companies. I sit on the board of the UN Global Compact Kenya, and we're seeing a great interest now with a large number of companies wanting to get on board and sign the 10 principles for the UN Global Compact. We're seeing a lot of interest also from innovators who are looking at innovations not purely for the sake of creating wealth, but also for innovations that have a very distinct social impact around very specific areas. And there have been some very good successful examples. So I think generally I find that there's a really good coming together of leadership for the right reasons, which includes, as I said, enlightened self-interest. It's about creating a win-win. It's about, moving and riding the changing financing and funding patterns, the changing consumer patterns as well. The other thing that I find very important is that, the average age in Kenya and in Africa is 19. We have what's often referred to as the demographic dividend potential here. Many other continents are going through the demographic echo with populations of an average of 49 or 50. What we need to think about is this is the market for the future. for a lot of other continents. Africa is the potential market. If we can engage young people, skill them, get them employed, if you can create potential future consumers. And that's why we're seeing this huge interest from private capital, but also investors globally. Like the Africa Diaspora Network that we meet in Silicon Valley and others, huge interest. The big issue and question is that since we have such incredible young tech-savvy innovators who are coming up with some incredible work, there seems to be a fragmentation also in the innovation ecosystem. So we've tried to create this SDG Accelerator Lab jointly with the Joe Mucheru and his team and partners to make sure there are clear pathways for public-private innovators to get the kinds of supports and nurturing that they require in order to grow and scale their innovations and to get to some level of benchmarking and accreditation, because not every innovation is the best innovation for Africa, and to make sure that they're demand-driven responses as opposed to technology being shoved down the throat of communities. As we think about this, one particular issue that has come up is that we are losing a lot of African IPs. A lot of young African innovators come up with an innovation are oftentimes cash-strapped. And you find that as soon as the innovation is more or less ready, there's somebody sitting with 5,000 US cash who will buy off the innovation. And the next thing you know, they'll move on to the other parts of the planet to create the next 50 million on that innovation. And we lose that IP. Oftentimes, young companies that get to the point of listing on the stock exchange also find that they're bought over very quickly and delisted. And those IPs oftentimes end up in Silicon Valley or other parts of the world. So we've actually been creating an initiative to establish an African IP company to protect African innovation, starting with Kenya, but then spreading it much wider, to ensure that young innovators and social enterprises that ride on their innovations actually get the cash flow they're looking for without throwing the baby out with the bathwater and without selling their innovations prematurely and losing them from the continent. There are other instances where one needs to ensure confidentiality and protection of their IPs, even locally. So working with any government or association or network in Kenya, we need to guarantee that these innovators have their interests protected. So we're looking at a number of those types of pathways to help young innovators and social enterprises to grow and get to the point where they can scale. I think the other big issue is that great parts of our country are in dire poverty. We know that northern Kenya, a number of other parts of the coast and other regions have traditionally had some of the highest poverty indicators, even if we have an average for Kenya. So notwithstanding 5-6% GDP growth rates, the growth rates and the GDP rates actually mask the huge inequities that are happening right now. And if we all talk the talk of SDGs and leaving no one behind, we need to walk the walk of doing that, because it's not rocket science. We know where they're left behind. The issue is, how do you de-risk some of these regions and attract private capital to markets that are hitherto not very attractive for them? And I think, for example, the Turkana example is a really exciting opportunity. We've done some work around Marsabit. We've done some work in other areas, even up to Mandera. So the opportunity is to create the kinds of de-risking funds, the kinds of crowding in of private sector that can eventually create a multiplier effect and get young people into SMEs, into livelihoods, and create a vibrant economy that does not entirely rely on government or donor funding. So I think being innovative about de-risking mechanisms also an opportunity, and a lot of the development partners, and we co-chair the development partner group currently, are quite keen. There's a number of guarantee schemes, there's a number of de-risking opportunities that are oftentimes underutilized for Africa. So we need to, I think, get to the next level now and really take stock of where are these opportunities and how do we drive these much more in convergence, so that we can actually drive private sector investments into areas that traditionally don't receive private sector capital. Let me stop there, but these are some of the really front of mind issues that I think we've got some exciting work going on, and I've learned a lot from this group, and I thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to keeping in touch with my fellow panelists and seeing how we might walk the talk on some of this stuff going forward. And thank you to Ashoka, and thank you to Tangaza.
Thank you so much, Arif, for giving us this time. Your insights are always, very eye-opening, and your experience is just quite admirable. Wish you the best on on your next engagement.
Thank you.
Clemens is an Ashoka Fellow out of Tanzania. I wanted to pick your mind on. I mean, you're at the front lines, collaborating and creating cross-sector partnerships. As you implement Jambo Bukoba, and also the question of leadership. You went through the visionary program yourself. Just within about maybe 3 minutes, just try and wrap this up, for us. Just to understand your experience, around this topic.
Thank you, Abu. So one was about collaboration, and the other one was about the visionary program. For me, I started this organization 12 years ago, and right from the beginning, collaboration was the major driver, because it was and is obvious that just with an idea, you can't change anything. So we are collaborating with regional authorities on grassroots level up to regional level. We are collaborating with the Tanzanian authorities, and collaboration is always key of what we are doing. And I think that only with true collaborations, because I think there are some different kinds of collaborations, yes. So only with true, open-minded, respectful collaboration, you can achieve a lot, yeah. And so this is my view about collaboration. In times now, as we are working now since 12 years, the way of collaboration has also changed, where in the beginning I was more a sort of informal collaborator, meaning people laugh about me because I'm hugging people if I like them. So I'm also hugging the Tanzanian ambassador if I like him. Yeah, and we are changing our approach to formalize it more, writing MOUs and contracts and agreements with the partners that we collaborate with. So we are bringing it on another level. So this is about collaboration. So I think without collaboration, you can't change anything or achieve anything. And then I think you also asked me about the visionary program and the impact that it had for me, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I joined the visionary program in 2017. I just looked at the certificate that I had, and I was really, really excited, happy that there is this kind of program here in Europe. I was happy to see you again, Abu, because I met you before that in Uganda, and it was great for me while I'm living in Germany, but we are working in Tanzania, to see African friends and peers there at this visionary program. So this was already the first thing that was really great, that it is so heterogeneous. So it is so many different people there, from organizations, from administrations, and for example, you were there, and also Sheila, another lady from Uganda was there. So I think if you want to change things, you need to be together with people who have the same spirit, because this inspires you. And sometimes you are facing hard times, and in these hard times, it's great to be connected to others who may have similar experiences, or can also tell you, yes, this is just the way it is, but after that comes another thing. So it was a great inspiration for me. We had 7 modules about social entrepreneurship, impact, and social business modeling. But I want to highlight one thing that was really important, most important for me. And this is a topic about system change, because I founded my organization like, yeah, you see a problem, you want to change it, you look what is the right body for it. We use an NGO, and the idea of system change was completely new for me, and to have the opportunity to learn from others, from Ashoka fellows, but also from others in the sector, was a great opportunity, and also to connect. I think it was more than 3 minutes, sorry.
Thank you so much, Clement. And I'm very quickly going to share my screen and show you what Clement was talking about. And basically, very quickly about the visionary program. It basically answers that question, and this is what Care, Ashoka, and ADA have been collaborating on. That question of, now that there's a need to develop more resilient models, based on cross-sector collaborations. How is the leadership changing? And how do we make sure that people who have been non-traditional participants in social entrepreneurship can come into this space and participate, in social entrepreneurship fully? Corporates, citizen sector, pure non-government organization, government people, right? So every year we bring together 30 people in an executive program that shares Ashoka's 40 years of experience on the subject of social entrepreneurship. And the goal is to basically create this new generation of leaders who can then take these new change maker skills back into their organizations and begin to transform their organizations from within. Bring them together with social entrepreneurs, the Ashoka fellows, to basically co-create and learn. And these are the 7 modules that that Ashoka basically takes the executives through: social entrepreneurship and innovation, impact and social business modeling, funding and scaling social innovation, new leadership, systems change, partnerships and co-creation, and the art of storytelling. And these are some of the things that we think people or executives need to learn and understand, as they begin to continuously, get involved in social entrepreneurship. Our first cohort actually begins next week on Friday is the first class, and again, it's a very eclectic, diverse group of people that's coming together, from entertainment to education, to pure development, international development. They come together and they're talking about the same issues, and the instructors or facilitators are also super experienced in the topic of social entrepreneurship and building systems change from within Ashoka fellows, and outside, of Ashoka academics who have developed deep opinions on 7 topics. Patrick, so Patrick is going to project the final thing that we're supposed to basically talk about, and these are basically sort of like a harvesting session, and each of us within maybe 2 minutes, it's sort of like your key takeaways from this conversation going forward. I'm just going to follow the order of the videos as I see them, and Ashley is basically at the top, at the top of that. What are your key takeaways? And the other question really is, what should we do to build better? But in really summarized way.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the key takeaways for me, I'm kind of coming from the finance angle, and so a lot of what I heard around like the profit with a purpose and really trying to change the way in which we think about doing business and integrating the SDGs into that thinking. And so whether that be in, working with social entrepreneurs to understand that and build that narrative, or working with the financiers to think really, critically about finance for good. But those were some of the key takeaways that really resonated with me. And I think the key thing was like, we can't do it alone. None of us can do it alone. And if I come in as a financier, I need this sort of consortium or collaboration with other players that are willing to pick up and work on the other elements that are complementary. So those were a big, key takeaways for me. I think there's a lot of shared interest and alignment in this group of panelists around what we want to do and what we want to achieve as far as change, opportunities to build on better. I think, in the development space, we constantly struggle with, kind of knitting together all of our very, kind of core abilities and making sure that we're being complementary, that we're sharing knowledge, that we're learning from one another, and that we're, we know who to tap into and who to reach out to when we see gaps that we're unable to fill. So there's just always room for improvement on that area of just making sure that we have the platforms to really bring the like-minded players together, where we can start to do more and do it in a bigger, better way, because we're all like playing a role. So those are my two kind of debriefs on those two questions.
Thank you, Ashley. Gunther, you'd go next. Your key learnings and what you see as opportunities for building, on these cross-sector collaborations.
Yeah, the key, the main learning is that you still need to be open to other ideas, to fresh ideas, and you have never learned enough about how the world is changing and how we can change the world. There are manifold opportunities. Maybe there are more opportunities than obstacles, but without understanding the how and the why, we will not be able to solve it. And this understanding is only possible if we do it in a joint manner, if we listen to each other, if we listen to each other problems, and having said this, I'm really looking forward working together with Ashoka on new opportunities, on new problems, on new solutions. I know that there are always fresh ideas from Ashoka, and I'm happy about this cooperation. And there are always ideas and that also challenge our systems at ADA. That's quite helpful and makes business more interesting, because it's not business as usual for us. It's always new. It's always seeks for new approaches within our own systems. So yeah, it's a very helpful thing, and I would really be happy if we could also help to scale up existing activities, grow existing approaches, and bring together people as well in the future.
Thank you, Gunther. We really appreciate the support of ADA in the work that that's happening on the continent. And Emma, your final thoughts on the two questions.
Thanks. And I think a lot of very smart things have been said already, but maybe just to add on, I think the other thing that really comes is re-emphasized for me from this conversation, and I think is one of the reasons that as an individual kind of leader of an organization, but also as CARE, I'm really interested in this conversation, is the emphasis on the need for us to continue to focus on the development of our own skills and capacities as leaders, and really recognize that challenge that faces us as leaders, but also leaders as change makers and models for others within our communities. Not only to be, to be responsible and show up in an appropriate way and all of that good stuff, but to really develop those muscles which are about adaptation, around partnership, around networking. I'm going to be honest, for me, it's easy for me to stay in my comfort zone, to talk, I know how to talk to our traditional partners. I understand the language and the vocabulary, and the awareness that we need to stretch ourselves to learn new languages to be able to speak to potential partners in different parts of society who may not, appreciate my, insightful monologues about gender equity, but may actually need to understand, need to see my point of view from perhaps more of an investment proposition perspective, so to kind of learn those languages and build those skills. And I think the other thing that really comes across from me is that kind of our capacity as leaders and as supporters of others to really listen to them and what they need, but also to be not to get stuck in what we think is the right thing to do, but to develop those muscles around adaptation, flexibility, the capacity to spot the opportunity, see the gap, and then change our plans to actually, get there, feels really important in this environment as well. Really inspiring, thinking about the ecosystem, but also quite inspired and taking away a lot of thoughts about the place of the individual change maker in that system. Over.
Thank you so much, Emma. And Vincent, please wrap it up for us. As the shoker, in this, and then we can end the session.
You have over and over again reinforced the whole angle of collaboration and leadership, and also just thinking the different structures for financing. So in terms of opportunities, what I'm seeing here is one, not just thinking, let's collaborate. I mean, that's great. But I'm thinking let's collaborate more to drive away from, to improve upon the direct service orientation that most social enterprises, most social entrepreneurs are inclined towards, more of systems change, because that's really the only way we will get to address some of these challenges. Or when we continue finding solutions for new challenges, they won't be the same challenges that we've been trying to address. So for me, that is one opportunity that I'm seeing. The other thing, my key takeaway is that we're just a step away from actualizing a lot of things that we'll be talking about. I look at, this conference, for instance, like I said earlier on, we were very intentional. We want to get those people that we don't interact with as much in the social impact space. And also we want to get those that we interact with, yes, but, sort of see things from a different perspective. So cross sector collaboration is real. This can happen. And again, the other thing, my key takeaway again, Abu, is that the environment is absolutely ripe to support this kind of engagement. Everything, all elements seems to be aligning to support more of this. And then also there is plenty of knowledge within the ecosystem. There are plenty of tools. And I like the fact that you talked about the visionary program that is kicking off in East Africa. That is like that's one of the tools that, we can plug in. Other social entrepreneurs can and other leaders can want to help them understand what the social impact looks like, especially those who are coming from the private sector. And for social entrepreneurs also to get to understand more around the bolts and nuts of running sustainable and successful ventures. I think I'll stop there, Abu. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vincent. And, thank you, everyone, for spending your, a few hours of your morning with us. Thank you for the panelists for, really insightful conversations. I look forward to continue these conversations, amongst ourselves, and hopefully, collaborate a little bit more, as we continue to redefine, how we deliver change, within our communities. I'm going to hand over. We've already run over time by probably about 10 minutes. I'm going to hand over back to Patrick from the AACOSE team. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, everyone, and yeah, and back to AACOSE for for further parts of this program.
Thank you very much, Abu. Thank you for that session. Very insightful. And it's a very good way to see how we can have concrete ecosystem for actualizing systems that will work for us. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Jeketule Soko, who on behalf of Tangaza will give some closing remarks. And after that, we will have Vincent giving some remarks. And then I'll be back to tell you what is happening in the afternoon. Thank you. Jeketule.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the closure of the 4th Annual African Conference on Social Entrepreneurship, AACOSE. Allow me to give a few remarks and thoughts about the conference. This conference comprised of sponsors, organizers, partners, and participants who reflected on the current reality of our society and how we can respond to the challenges of our society in a better and transformed way. And this, we're aiming at transforming the society. And indeed, ladies and gentlemen, without your support, we wouldn't have been successful. The theme of the conference is really ideal for today's world. The central theme, the central question that we asked was, how can social entrepreneurship be a paradigm for inclusive economic growth and recovery? And this was really key in our conference. And this was so that we can all move together to address the societal challenges. And the conference brought retrospective questions on the nexus of academia and practitioners, and also how the community can participate in their own sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, the academia brought knowledge and skills on how to identify research gaps and how to actually respond to those research gaps. And the practitioners were actually able to address those issues based on the research gaps from the academia. Additionally, this conference actually helped us to be empowered with the right tools to address societal challenges. Practitioners have brought out the experience to inform academia so that they develop curricula that resonates with the societal needs. And we're asking ourselves what works and what doesn't work so that we can address the societal challenges. We have shared knowledge, we have shared insights, we have shared competencies, and we have created networks within this actual conference. And more importantly, we have been able to participate in addressing sustainable development goals within our deliberations. We have discussed, ladies and gentlemen, in our plenaries, in our breakout sessions, a number of issues. Allow me at this point to point out a few of those elements. The element of COVID has brought out several issues that made us to actually move with change. And we have actually been moving with that tremendous change. For example, in the area of sustainable agriculture, we asked ourselves, how does social entrepreneurship contribute to sustainable agriculture? And how can it contribute better? And the challenges of the middleman and the contribution of technology to enhance sustainable agriculture were core in our discussions. As regards to health systems, we also talked about how does social entrepreneurship contribute to health systems? What models work? What models can be scaled up? And we also looked at how COVID has brought about synchronous and asynchronous learning in the education sector. But we also faced some challenges there when we were actually discussing does actually synchronous and asynchronous learning or e-learning, does it leave others out? Does it leave the margins out? How do social entrepreneurship models bridge the gap? And this was actually what we are discussing in our conference. So that education is for all, not only for those who have. We also moved further to look at ethics, and we ask ourselves, how can social entrepreneurship bring about economic justice and social impact? We explored the role of social financing in creating impact on society, and especially for those who are at the bottom of the pyramid. We also looked at technology, and indeed, as you have noted in our discussions, we looked at how technology has brought out enormous innovations which entrepreneurs have embraced. We have looked at remote working. We have looked at model policies which we can put in place in academia. We have deliberated on how entrepreneurs can be innovative in using technology to address societal challenges. As we come to the end of this conference, we ask ourselves, how do we continue the fire of social entrepreneurship? Fellow entrepreneurs, we need to collaborate so that we can make a difference in the society. We need to continue this social entrepreneurship discussion space. Tangaza College offers an innovative program on social entrepreneurship, which aims at empowering students with hands-on knowledge and skills on entrepreneurship through actually the Masters in Business Administration. Could that be one of the elements we can embrace? AACOSE offers innovative visionary program which supports social entrepreneurs who can actually be change. AACOSE offers an innovative visionary program which supports social entrepreneurs who are actually change makers globally. Ladies and gentlemen, let this not be the end, but the beginning of a greater collaboration among us social entrepreneurs. And with these few remarks, I thank you very much for participating in this AACOSE conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jeketule. Thank you for those clear remarks that we really need to collaborate for engaging further into entrepreneurship and making a good economic recovery in Africa. At this moment, I will invite Vincent Othiambo, who is the AACOSE Regional Director. Welcome, Vincent.
Thank you. Thank you, Benedetta. Thanks to everyone who has joined this morning and also who has been part of this since yesterday. I think the panelists, you have touched on so many points that I wanted to, summarize. I want to resist that temptation. But all in all, one of the things that really has come out strongly and what AACOSE was intending to model is the ecosystemic approach when it comes to solving the many challenges that we are seeing across the continent, but also across the world. We are appreciating more and more that silos have to be broken. And we are seeing, from case examples that we have been following throughout this conference since yesterday, that there are organizations, there are individuals, there are international NGOs like CARE, there are also private development partners like Ocean Development Authority, for instance, and there are also institutions of higher learning like Tangaza through the Institute of Social Transformation. There are also other private sector players, the corporates, the traditional corporates, who are embracing this and are already moving into collaborate more intentionally to accelerate impact and also to find better ways to innovate and better ways to hasten our development as a continent. Now, Jeketule has mentioned the annual Africa Conference on Social Entrepreneurship being a nexus between social entrepreneurs and academia. So during the opening, I mentioned something here that was the original idea. But of course, seeing two things. One, the way the world is changing, the reality is that you cannot even just think about solutions for anything, just two sectors. It is not practical. It is also not sustainable. So we became very intentional to reach out to partners that we've always reached out to, partners that we've never reached out to, people that we had ways of connecting with, and people that we didn't have ways of connecting with. Institutions that traditionally would have shied away from being associated with, what some people confuse to be charity work, social entrepreneurship, to institutions that are absolutely aligned to the whole idea of running business in a way that you're thinking of your stakeholders, not just your shareholders. It's running business with a purpose. We reach out to everyone. And that is how the annual Africa Conference of Social Entrepreneurship, the 4th edition, became a reality. And also, this would not have been a reality if it were not for you who joined as a participant or as a keynote speaker in a plenary like the one that we just had, or as a speaker in the Brain Trust session, where we put together experts to help in unpacking and, of course, finding solutions, advising, giving strategic advice, opening up opportunities to participants. And I think that is the session that is coming after this. We also have the thematic areas that we have, again, also identified experts who have come in. And we want to thank you also for those who help us put together this content. It is not a closing moment for the conference. We still have those 2 big sessions going on. But so far, talking to some of you directly since yesterday, and kind of just surfacing things that are coming through from the conversations that we are having. In addition to the opportunities that have been shared during this, the just ended plenary, there's also one opportunity that is really huge, and everyone is talking about this. How do we bring more people into social entrepreneurship movement? So everyone is talking about the population of young people. I think there are so many companies and organizations are out there who are really investing in bringing more young people into the space of social entrepreneurship, or even just, established social entrepreneurs. So mine is to point that out because of the special interest that we have as Ashoka also in, advancing this vision for everyone a Changemaker world, where everyone gets to have the skill, the network, the competency that it takes for them to solve problems, as they occur. I know one of the partners that we've collaborated with here is Nestle East Africa, Eastern Southern Africa, that is also heavily investing in supporting young people into social entrepreneurship and change making. The same I've seen with Bayer East Africa. The reason why I'm mentioning this is that there is that huge opportunity. If we look at all these different players who have been, in this panel that has just ended, we need to kind of just think of that as well, like put a bit more premium on supporting more young people into social entrepreneurship. It could also be some of the trainings that a university like Tangaza is offering. And so for me, that is one thing that I just wanted to mention because of that interest for us to grow a generation of more social entrepreneurs, of more change makers, people are able to solve for the different challenges that we're seeing, because that is what the world is currently demanding. That is the reality that the COVID pandemic has sort of showed us. The other thing also that we've surfaced from the different conversations is that there is a possibility of some initiatives coming off the annual Africa Conference of Social Entrepreneurship. One of these is an ecosystem learning lab. And maybe some of these things are not necessarily, we're not going to pursue them to actualize them, unless there is support, unless there is interest, but just to mention some of the things that are coming out. There is that idea of probably having a capacity building space, could be virtual, because then we are able to connect from different parts. And there's one that has really, really interested me, that we could actually have the annual Africa Conference of Social Entrepreneurship happening in different regions. We have the conference attracted people from across the continent, really. And this is, of course, because of the networks that we were able to bring. Their suggestion, if you could have it in South Africa, if you could have it in West Africa, either Sahel or Anglophone. And also there is a proposal that can we move this to even Europe, even in the US. So we are loving some of these things that are already coming back, because we still have 2 more sessions, the Brain Trust and the different thematic areas that is coming up. I know we will surface more by the end of this conference, and we will be sharing. Now, let me thank specifically our partners here who, because of their investment in this conference, we made it possible. Those who participated, of course, those who have been panelists, of course, and the team that has been organizing this, of course, including Newmark. We appreciate all of you. I want to mention the Ashoka Visionary Program that brings together this partnership of CARE, OSCE Development Authority, PwC, and of course Ashoka. I also want to mention E4 Impact, who have been part and parcel of AACOSE since the very beginning. They continue, supporting AACOSE. I also want to mention MESP, who have also been a supporter of AACOSE since the very beginning. Etimos also been a key supporter of AACOSE. Vilgro Kenya, which is now grown to become Vilgro Africa, has been a key supporter of AACOSE. And Nestle East and Southern Africa also has been a key supporter of AACOSE. This is to mention just but a few, but all the partners who participated here, be it in terms of helping us figure out the content, and a special shout out to the brain trust experts, because we know you could have been spending this time trying to do something, doing something different. But you have given your expertise, you've given your knowledge, you've given your time to come and share and help social entrepreneurs and other participants to figure out solutions to challenges around leadership, around financing or funding, and also around collaboration. We appreciate you. The conference continues until the end of the day. When the conference comes to an end, you can sign off to your favorite song. Mine will be Jerusalem. But all in all, we are looking forward to seeing you immediately after the conference. We will be sharing a communique to you via email, and also we'll keep you updated on some of these issues and suggestions that are coming up, the ideas that are coming up. We will keep you updated through a newsletter. Thank you so much, and may you continue enjoying.
Thank you very much, Vincent. It's a pleasure having you around to give us those remarks. Thank you very much. This is Benedetta Karaoke from Tangaza University College. Thank you.